Hello everyone. Today we're looking at installing SQL Server 2022 on Windows, and we're going to be looking at what's different, and then we'll go ahead and actually do the installation. Installing SQL Server 2022 is not so different from the way you install SQL Server 2016, SQL Server 2017, and SQL Server 2019, except with a few key differences. In SQL Server 2022, the setup changed. Now, if you look at the features page where we go through the installation process, everything I have here in red have been removed. Our Python removed, Polybase removed, machine learning, distributed replay, all stretch databases, all this were removed from the setup. The same way we had SSRS removed from previous version setup, that's how these were removed. And then we had some other ones that got added, right? We have the Azure extension for SQL Server. If you need to connect your SQL Server to Azure, which is great. And if you want to connect SQL Server to Azure, so you have the Azure extension. Azure extension for SQL Server connects SQL Server instances to Azure Arc and enables Microsoft Defender for cloud and other Azure services, which is great. So you don't necessarily have to do this unless you're trying to connect your on-premise state to Azure. But that extension has been put in here and made easy. You go ahead and put in your credentials and get along with it. And then you can also choose your plan here, whether it's going to be pay as you go or how you want to have it done. You can go ahead and do that. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this if you're not connecting your estate to Azure. But this is an option here that can allow you to do this during the setup and just make things a bit easier. Now, if you don't do this connection or this linking during installation or during setup, can you still do it? Yes, once you've installed SQL Server and the need comes or arises for you to connect your estate to Azure, to the cloud, you're able to do it too. I think you're able to do that with a script. Now let's go ahead and actually walk through the setup of SQL Server. So I have a plain vanilla installation right here. If I bring up my File Explorer and I go to this PC, you can see I only have one drive. So what I did here, just to mimic what we would have in production environment or in most places, I created separate folders and labeled them as drives, even though we know that this whole thing is going to be on drive C, but just to kind of mimic what you see in on a real business environment. Otherwise, if this is my lab, or if you're working on your lab, we can let everything we're going to install, go ahead and just install on the default part in drive C. So first, I will pull up Edge and download the ISO. Download SQL Server 2022. I can click on this and download it through here. Uh, since I'm doing this, I'm looking for the free edition. I want to scroll down and download now and go ahead to download the free edition. And even if I click on developer, during the setup, you're able to determine or choose if you're installing evaluation, developer, or express. Or we can also go to the Microsoft Evaluation Center and just download the bits, which I would do. I will click on this. And with this download, I'm assuming you would have gone through the prerequisites of installing SQL Server and everything that you need to do. So I'll go ahead, let's pull up that file that I downloaded. So if I open this up, you can decide, depending on what you want to do, how the installation process you want to, this will depend on how you want to download this. Usually I like to do custom. You can decide to get the media where you have the ISO. So it's easy for you to have everything in one place. But I like to do the custom, so everything goes into a specific path in the folder in my drive. I found that usually this is easier for me to do setting automation, and I'll show you how this would um, look like. I'll just pause this and let this download. It's not supposed to take long, but let me pause it. So this is now that the download is done, it pulls up the SQL Server Installation Center, but I'll close this and go to my File Explorer just to show us where it downloaded. And we can see it created a folder with SQL Server 2022 files. If I go in a folder, I can right click on the setup and run as administrator. This is if I don't want to install using the ISO. Usually if you download the ISO, you're able to right click and mount and also bring up the installation center. You're able to install the same way anyway. So installing a fresh SQL Server instance, doing a standalone, I will click on installation and click on new SQL Server standalone installation and features. We'll click on that. And here, like I was explaining, you're able to choose the edition that you want to install. I would go ahead and choose, if whether we choose evaluation or developer, it's going to be the same features like enterprise. But for the evaluation, that would only last 6 months. Developer, you can use that for a while, right? So let's go ahead and do evaluation. I can upgrade this later. I think I have a separate video for that too. And you want to accept the license terms and continue, continue. You want to review this before continuing. If you're in a production environment, of course, you want to make sure everything is right. But for the Windows firewall, I can have a warning here in my lab. That's fine, and we can continue. This page is where you choose the features that you want to install. In this case, I'm choosing just the database engine. And this was where we saw those earlier on what we're talking about, where certain features were removed. So it's part of the change, part of where those changes happened that we talked about earlier. And right here, it shows the root directory where this would be installed. This can be changed. Usually in production environments, you're not installing on putting this in drive C mostly. That can be changed. These paths can be changed. If you click on the ellipsis button, um, you can select a path where you want this to go. I'm going to close that back because let them go ahead and install in C. And because I'm installing a default instance, I'm just going to leave it this way. If you're installing a named instance, then we want to choose named instance and give that um, um, instance a name and then click on next. Here we would choose the service account that would run SQL Server and database engine and the agents. And I'm also going to click on this grant perform volume maintenance. This is going to enable instant file initialization so that it's faster to write on these pages and it doesn't have to zero out. That's a conversation for another day. I would choose the service account that I want. Of course, you would already know the service account name that you're using. I have one in the domain, and because I don't want to use the same the one provided for me by SQL Server, and go ahead and type a password. The password for the account that was chosen, and I'll use the same here for my SQL Server database engine. Usually, you may want to make this different in a production environment, the account that runs it, but it depends on how it's being done in your organization. I want to set this also to automatic. I don't think I'll be using the browser for anything right now. I'll just go ahead and leave it as disabled. On the collation tab, we can choose the collation type that we want. It usually would default to whatever it is. And it will tell you here about uh, the type, if it's case sensitive or case insensitive. You can customize this, and you can also do this for your databases when you're installing, when you're creating databases, and choose which collation type it should be. And this can also be changed after the setup. I'll go ahead and click on Nest. I'm leaving it as the default. And on this Nest screen, we want to choose our authentication type, if it's going to be Windows authentication, how we log on to the server, or if it's going to be mixed mode. For mixed mode, you're able to use Windows accounts and you're able to use SQL accounts. I'm going to use Windows. If you choose to use mixed mode, then it asks you for a password. But since I'm going on with the Windows authentication, I don't need to do that. It already knows I'm already logged on. I'm going to add the current user, and on the data directories, remember those folders I created before? If I go back in here, where I chose drive A, drive B, drive C for the log and the temp DB and all of that, because it's highly recommended that you have different drives for those things. And here's where it's going to come into play. I think I pulled my setup down mistakenly. So for the root directory, I'm just going to let it go to C, right? And for my user database directory, these I will go ahead and change. You want to usually change this to whatever drive you're given in your environment. I would use drive A for data. And for the log, I would use drive B for log. So the logs go there. And my backup, I have a different folder I created for backup. I would use, I had that somewhere, backup. And if we come to TempDB, the same thing, because you usually want to have your TempDB separated from your data files. For TempDB data directory, I'll go ahead and remove this and add. Go back to those folders which are mimicking drives for me, because you have your drives. And I'll choose TempDB data. And for the TempDB log, I'll do the same thing and choose this. Click OK, and that's changed for me for TempDB log. Now, configuring TempDB is very important for SQL Server, because TempDB does a lot of work, and Microsoft gives some recommendations. There are also a lot of best practices on what to do. During installation, some of these things can be done during installation or setup. They can also be done afterwards. Now, when it comes to the number of files that you should have, even though the default says one, Microsoft recommends, and there are other best practices, a website that would recommend what to do. Usually, to avoid contention, you want to create multiple TempDB files of 8 equally sized. I think there's a Microsoft documentation here that I have. I can show us. I'll put this link in the description below. And if we go to the number of files, number of TempDB data files that you should have, So we can see part of what he's saying here, how we have to have these configured, usually 8, depending on the cores that we have, right? Our processor, and then increase by multiple of 4 afterwards. TempDB is a whole topic of its own, which we will address later, but you can do that here by selecting the number of files that it needs to be, especially to avoid contention and for depending on the workload that it's going to be running. I can leave this right here as 1, which will show 1 file, but for this presentation, I'm going to go ahead and just put um, 8. So we'll see how it looks like when this is done. I'll leave the initial size the same. For the auto growth, I'm also going to have it set to what it is right now, just for this demonstration. And then for maxed up, there are different, we also want to configure maxed up. There's best practice recommendation for that. And for the memory, we also want to configure the memory, different recommendations for that. I'll go ahead and for this presentation and go ahead and use the recommended. We can configure memory too after setup. File stream, I wouldn't be doing anything with file stream here. So I'm just going to leave this the way it is. This can also be um, redone or enabled or disabled after setup. I will hit the continue button here. I already added myself. And this gives us a summary of what we'll be doing, what we're installing. And it shows us the file path. And we'll click on install. I'm just going to pause this for a bit and let it finish installing. Now that the installation is done, it brings us to this final page to show us that it was successful, right? I'll go ahead and close this and pull up SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. If you don't have SQL Server Management Studio, you can actually install here from the installation center, or go ahead and just go to Microsoft website. You can type that on Google, download SSMS, and you are able to um, download that and install it. It's a very simple process to do that installation. And you can see the website right here that I have pulled up. So pull up SSMS, and let's log into that server or the instance. And now let's sign in and log in. Remember, I did this for Windows authentication, so I'm logging in as a Windows user. And let's make this optional. This is our instance of SQL Server, right? And remember we talked about for the system databases when we're talking about TempDB, creating multiple files for TempDB database. If I go in and pull up the properties and click on the files, here we can see those number of files we talked about because we chose, instead of, if we had left it to be 1 that it was, we would see the tempdb log file, we'll see the tempdb data file. But because we chose additional files, making it 8 data files, so we're seeing additional data files in here just to help with contention. Now you can do your setup, like I said, with just one, and you can definitely add, you can see this here, you can add additional files later on and size them equally if you need to. But you want to do this based on the calls that you have on your server. I'll put the link to that documentation below, as I said earlier. So now, if I get out of here, I can run a simple query to select add version. And this is what we have. This is what we installed, right? SQL Server 2022 Evaluation Edition. If it was developer, you would see developer. If it was enterprise, you would see enterprise. And this is how you install SQL Server. And in this case, SQL Server 2022. But the process is the same from 2016 to 2022, except with the exception of certain things being removed from the features page. Thank you for watching. You can like and subscribe for more videos like this if this video was helpful to you.